Hi, so I'm back once again to discuss the latest 3 chapters of ToG. Now, to be honest, there's not as much discussion-worthy content as I'd like to cover, but oh well. Let's dive in anyways. So, first off, we get a little more info on the healing flame that Wunyeon possesses, and how this is originally used on a Kun family member. Now, I can't deny I would have liked to get a name at the very least, but SAU is still on that vagueness gimmick apparently. What's surprising though is that he actually explains somewhat of the Floor history. So apparently the Kukum tribe are human-like creatures that ruled over several other different species, including the Duni tribe, who are made up of pigs pretty much. The Kukums despised the Dunis for their appearance and slaughtered them in response to this hatred. Now, I'm not sure if I'm reading too much into this, but this conflict comes across as sort of like an allegory for not only IRL racism, but also the genocides of tribal cultures, e.g. the English invading Aboriginal lands in Australia and massacring the people they believe to be savages or lesser intelligent, ugly creatures. I don't know, SAU doesn't really go into enough depth to speculate much, so I could just be overanalyzing his intent. I will also say that I think this background of the floor lends credence to my argument that because many floors are the size of continents, floor rulers are not really able to monitor all inhabitants. This is why places like Mirbachan village and even the multitude of tribes were allowed to steep into bad, violent practices without any intervention. We know that many floor rulers do not appreciate chaos in their floor, so I believe it's less that they ignore it and more that they don't know much about these conflicts. Next up, we find that Wunyeon stupidly gave the last member of the Duni tribe, Devi, a golden hammer infused with his flame of Yeon. Now, I gotta admit, I've seen some folks have a little sook over Wunyeon being this silly and careless. And on one hand, I get that people like to preserve the 10 great families as these special, powerful houses with equally important residents, but it can't hurt to have a few goofballs amongst the bunch. And I like that Evan even tries to explain the situation away as rankers living so long that they almost become kids again. But then Wunyeon just shows he's a bona fide idiot because he not only gives away his hammer to Devi, but also places a curse on it so he can't take it back. Like, you can't really explain that level of stupidity, honestly. What's nice about this plot convenience is that Lesu and Hatsu are tasked with retrieving the hammer, so we get some nice moments between those two for once. SAU rarely grants us this type of focus on Season 1 characters, so I appreciated just hanging out with them while they tried to figure out how to trick Devi into handing over the hammer. And the solution was actually kinda great, because the ironically named fluffy dwarf accompanying them put on the acting performance of a lifetime. I never expected this blob would actually be useful, so I didn't even talk about him when I was discussing Woon's character design. But nope, apparently I was wrong. This dude single-handedly convinced Debbie with his crying show, and they got the hammer back easy peasy thanks to Lesu's clever story. And I also especially enjoyed the little monologue from Lesu on the way back to Woon's residence about the psychological trauma that poor or weak people carry around with them, highlighting that some people follow a darker path from retaliation while even rarer few use their experience with the trauma to support those in trouble. I personally think Lesu is either talking about himself here or someone that he knows, and I'm kinda hoping for the latter simply because it'd be neat to get more background on Lesu, but who knows which direction SAU is taking his character. After this whole side journey, the hammer wakes Kun up pretty quickly, which is not what I wanted, but I understand the pacing reasons behind this decision. I hope this doesn't turn into a random power-up for Kun Shinsu though, but judging from chapter 4, it's getting super likely that the Flame of Yeon will influence him in some way or shape or form. So overall, while I'm not fond of Kun being restored so effortlessly, the actual journey definitely had a lot of fun moments. By itself, Caliban's demotion from his position is completely warranted and unsurprising, but the weird thing is that most people didn't even know about this when the chapter was released. These couple panels were not included in the scanlation for whatever reason, so raw readers had to inform everyone of the missing section. Honestly, this kind of incompetence is just unacceptable. It's one thing to mispronounce names or make minor grammatical errors, it's another thing entirely to not include panels altogether. I think what frustrates me is that the line translators are giving scanlators enough reason to undermine the official releases and prevent SAU from receiving the cash flow associated with viewer ratings of each chapter. If people see a new chapter regardless of who it's translated by, they will flock in droves for that chapter. Just like the first chapter of Season 3 with Gemini's Box. This affects readership of the official version and in turn affects SAU's income. He already works hard enough as it is, but Line are adding extra pressure by potentially reducing his income. I gotta say quickly, but the intern is really growing on me. She's kinda cute, has a little grey sidekick, and she makes some valid points now and again. I also like that SAU is expanding upon the idea that not all regulars get to continue climbing the tower, because not all are strong enough to become rankers. Sometimes you just have to compromise and pick a profession on one of the floors, even if it's a kinda awful organisation like Yama's. You need to make ends meet somehow. So I'd say this is another allegory for Koreans pursuing a stable salaryman's position instead of pursuing their own dreams. But maybe the thematic implications are probably a little bit too on the nose for that. Either way, it's pretty clear to me what SAU is going for in a sense. So we also get some info on both the regular combat arena where Yama pits homeless dogs against each other, and also the mysterious Dang Dang. The former is way more interesting since I'm wondering if this arena is the fabled Baylord, a long, narrow fighting pit that's supposed to be hidden somewhere in the tower. I'm gonna have to say no, just because this seems almost like a prelude to the real tournament, especially because it's designed for regulars specifically. And also, the Canine 2 Festival is something that Yama has alluded to in the other chapters, so I'm not sure if maybe that's when we're gonna see Baylord, or maybe SAU has just scrapped the concept altogether. I really hope not, because it was one of the things I was looking forward to most with this arc. So I just hope it's in there somewhere. That being said, the cage is actually pretty cool as far as ship constructions go, being a circular halo-like vessel with glass exteriors and a cube stage in the middle. It seems from the last chapter that the outer ring houses officers, including Baylord Yama's section, so hopefully Bam moves through those areas before heading for Dang Dang. I'd really like to see a little bit more of the area itself, and maybe more of the supervisor's offices, and just get a little more world building and lore into this place. Moving on to the next chapter, this one was really sparse on content, mostly acting as a bridge for the latest chapter. However, there were a couple moments I definitely want to at least briefly mention. On the 49th floor, we see that Rak is struggling with maintaining control over his rock powers, probably because he didn't receive help from Evankel. So I imagine this little character arc will eventually feed into learning more of the background behind his ancient species, but for now, just a lot of setup really. Kun, on the other hand, is perceiving visions of a sweet fish covered in what appears to be either red fire, blood, or an unknown liquid. I don't have many speculations about the nature of his vision, but I'd recommend watching Nia D. Hemming's videos on his thoughts about it. I'm not sure if I fully agree with the proposition of a fire and ice combination, but there's definitely something to it, since Kun explicitly mentions later on that his body temperature is fluctuating really rapidly. Either way, SAU had to give Kun and Rak power-ups at some point. Like he said as much through Kun in the prior chapter, when he questions how far Bam is developing ahead of them. Like, this is a common problem with shonen series that feature a talented main protagonist with his own goals separate from the other main characters, and sort of the only way to fix that is to either abandon them, relegate them to support characters, or progress them at a similarly fast pace to the protagonist, which in some cases can actually create more issues depending on the naturalistic feeling of these power-ups. To me, it seems like SAU is going with the third option, but we'll see how it ends up. I also can't forget to mention that while these developments were solid, the test itself was bland and boring like most of Season 2. I don't want to be too negative, but I miss the floor of tests, where each test had a distinct purpose and inventive design other than kill a certain number of enemies within a time limit. I guess this is the price of going full battle shonen, but it's still disappointing. I mean, this was a C rank test. I repeat, a C rank test, and it looked exactly the same as many other tests we've seen before. Shouldn't there be special requirements to advance to C rank, considering it's the midway point of regular ranks? I don't know, it seems like SAU lately just avoids interesting test designs. I really don't have much to say about this fight, except that the choreography was probably some of the best in recent memory from SAU. Like, way better than Jinsang vs Caliban, which was still really good. I think the best way to sum up my thoughts on it is that it was extremely clear how both characters were moving, where they were moving, and how they counteracted each other. Spatial awareness was really great, but I have to admit that the drawing quality was also super good as well. I especially love the shot of knockoff White just coming out of a spinning move into a kick, mainly because of the neat expressions and body contortions. And as I said, it was obvious, but Yue didn't die, of course. I don't know why SAU made it so ambiguous, because it was always clear she was going to be a hostage. It feels like Mashima writing tactics, in which he pretends to kill characters just for the suspense, thus making the actual character deaths feel really sporadic. So lastly, I'd just like to... well, actually, this kind of leads into my discussion of the most recent chapter, but SAU finally decides to reveal Baylord Yama in the flesh, and interestingly, he actually looks mostly human. Why I find that intriguing is because most of Yama's forces are explicitly modelled after canines, even taking on different names related to them, such as fighting dogs, mad dogs, and homeless dogs. Yama definitely has some dog-like ears and sharp teeth, but apart from that, his appearance is humanoid. Hell, SAU is even going so far as to place a towel over his head to obscure his more natural canine features. So I actually think this is not just a conscious choice by SAU to make Yama distinct from his subordinates, but also a show of superiority by Yama, highlighting that he is the owner of these dogs. If this is the intention, the extremely on-the-nose designs might actually be more inspired than I originally thought, and actually more integral to the overarching saga itself. I also feel a little silly mentioning this because it could just be simply the odd angle of his elbow and shoulder, but it looks like Yama might be missing his right arm. The common sense inside of me says his arm is just hanging behind the bath wall, and the theorist inside of me says that SAU hasn't depicted his right side at all in these panels, which is slightly suspicious. Though I might just be talking trash, so FastPass readers, feel free to correct me in the comments if it's not too big a spoiler. Like, say his arm is missing because it's somehow intertwined with some important backstory. And one last thing about Yama specifically, but the panel where his shadow in the bath forms a yellow horned demon is a tad foreboding, considering this happens when he's talking about the upcoming Canine Tooth Festival. It's also just a freaking well-illustrated panel, As is the entire chapter really. You'll hear me say that a lot actually, but the artistry was on point. As I noticed in my last discussion video, Karaka is totally growing to be fond of Bam, and is actually starting to respect his clear power. I remember seeing a comment on Reddit about Karaka actually being a huge tsundere, and maybe they're right. SAU went out of his way to poke fun at Karaka with the cartoony paneling, which is something I felt came across really well throughout this entire chapter. Lots of fun expressions all the way through, like way more than I'm used to in Season 2. This was the same with Knockoff White's interactions with Bam's crew, and especially Elaine. Like the panel where SAU highlights that Knockoff White is weak against animals and then cheekily points to Elaine's wolf anima bloodline, was a humorous nod that actually caught me off guard with how clever it was. And I guess speaking of Knockoff White, those two have joined up with Bam's crew obviously. Now, I don't really care about this partnership and even Yiwa being held hostage because I know they'll get her back eventually. I think what I enjoyed about this stuff was once again the expressionism of Knockoff White, especially in that moment where he goes full chibi because everyone is ignoring him and you've just got the quiet captain trying to hold him back. Like, this is the good content that I'm here for. I know I've harped on a little bit about how I'm not a huge fan of how on the nose the dog shelter is with its canine influences. Like most of Yama's subordinates so far have had super generic and forgettable designs, but I gotta say, Du Tong, if that's how you say it, the level 3 supervisor, is actually freaking awesome. To be honest, I'm not even sure why I like his design so much. Though the tough outside but gentle inside trope is definitely part of the reason. I think the intern's comments played a part too, where she was having none of his cuddly persona, which was amusing to say the least, especially when she tried to bluff about him being fluffy and he took her up on the offer immediately to pet him. And then you see the full chibi face come out again and it's just great. I genuinely did get some good laughs out of this chapter. And then, holy shit, it's actually crazy that I knew who Mad Dog Barabbas was before he was reintroduced. Like, I reckon I could have got a silhouette of him and still recognized him. For some bizarre reason, I never expected him to appear this early on in the arc, but I guess SAU's gotta set up that character thread at some point. Though it was kinda weird because I totally forgot about what the Blood Tamara was until I did a little research. And if anyone is still wondering, the Blood Tamara was actually a prize from the Workshop Battle arc that Barabbas won in the one-shot, one-opportunity game at the beginning of the tournament. It's pretty similar to the Red Lobster exoskeleton that Bam received from ToG, in that it strengthens your defense by infusing it into your bloodstream. The only issue is now that Barabbas owns multiple Blood Tamara, so he won't be taken down pretty easily, I imagine. Even if apparently Bam's Shinsu boost is nearly as strong as one Blood Tamara. And lastly for this video, I'm gonna skip over Dang Dang for now. I feel like if I talk about him, because we don't know much about his personality, powers, and past, I'll have to focus on his appearance, which is just oof. It's not a good look to say the absolute least. So with that said, I think I'm done. Thanks for watching, and I will have this Rand video out sometime next week or the week after that. So see you then.